agenda in front of me.
Oh,
Andrea.
You didn't pick one up out there.
Yeah. Hey, Creeth, would you get me one?
Yes.
Or call, or.
It's
or
only
email
10
me
pages.
and let me know.
Anyone else?
Yes, please.
There's a whole bunch of them. You might as well bring it all back in
Well,
here.
you're the one sitting at my seat. I was dropping the ball. What?
There's a lot.
Start to the live broadcast.
Nobody signed up to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Here you go, sir.
There's one thing on the agenda.
I did forget. And you did too.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, sir.
It's the least I can. You want me to give the presentation too?
Please.
You want, man.
You wanna do roll call?
Chaos.
You wanna do the minutes?
No.
Oh, why not? This one's gonna be.
I don't have the minutes. I don't have anything. All right. We're going to call the meeting to order. First item is approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any questions, comments, deletions, motions? Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Staff report on recent council meetings.
Chairman, I can knock out here, item 3 and 4, if you don't mind.
Okay.
All right. So in town council, they did hear, in November, 504 Keys Lane, a 2-unit plan unit development was approved, as well as 406 Harper Avenue was same 2-unit, 2 detached single-family homes were approved. 1012 Lake Park Boulevard South, that was a business plan unit development that was denied because of the landscaping requirement was not met. He did try to, the applicant spruce it up a little bit more than what you saw, but there were still items that he did not meet, and council elected to deny it. 401 Marina Street was actually tabled by the applicant and will be heard at the town council January 14th. That's for at the Carolina Beach Marina and Yacht Club expansion.
Can I interrupt and ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So the Lake Park Boulevard South one, we just straight turned it down, right?
Yes.
So but yet they didn't bring it to council the way they brought it here. At what point are they not, like, what do you consider such a large alteration that it doesn't count anymore?
So if it was something that they were trying to address your concerns or issue by just adding some landscaping, then that's something that could move forward. If it was a substantial plan altering maybe parking or ingress or egress or drive aisles, or if the building was bigger or some, things of that nature, then it would need to come back for review if it was a substantial change.
Gotcha. All right, thanks.
For permitting, we've issued 69 permits, 18 for new construction, and we've also finalized 18 buildings.
Is
Code
that
enforcement,
Is
we
that
were-
last month, Jeremy? The new
the
construction permit?
past 2 months is with those numbers,
Oh,
since we didn't meet last month.
that's right.
We received in that time frame 31 complaints, and 25 of those have been resolved, and were found to be in violation. 4 demolition, 1 being on Cape Fear Boulevard, Cape Fear and 6th Street for large single-family home that was used for fire training. It is now, I think today they started cleaning up the remnants of that, and that property will be subdivided into 4 lots for 4 single-family homes. For commercial development, we've issued 2 finals. One was the addition for St. Paul's Church, and also a nail spa. Final that's we located in the Publix shopping center. Also in the Publix shopping center, permits issued was for us, or applied for, was a Seacoast rental upfit to be beside Salty Chic. We also have a coffee shop located on Cape Fear Boulevard on the bottom floor of a mixed-use building next to Forking Court. And moving forward with a rooftop bar on top of Hurricane Alleys, which a industry's permit was issued for.
I'm sorry, Jeremy, where was the Seacoast Rentals?
in Public Shopping Center. And coming up, conditional use permit was applied for by Bryant Real Estate. This is at the corner of Risley and Lake Park Boulevard, where their real estate building that they just constructed. And in the back, they want to do 3 units. We have a application site plan submitted for Bojangles. That is going, former site of what was going to be, it's kind of a revolving door for this site next to Walgreens on the right. First, it was going to be a Burger King, then it was going to be a Wendy's, then it was going to be a hotel, and now we'll see if Bojangles can make the cut. And then in January, council wanted to, before they elected a new planning and zoning member, they wanted the new council to make that decision, so they offered to wait. And that will be, I've heard there's several applications on file. A lot of people are interested, and they'll be appointing a new member. And next meeting, planning and zoning, will be a big one. It's going to, town council wanted to meet with the planning and zoning commission at your next meeting, January 9th, to discuss the land use plan. So we'll be introducing that to you, and from where the committee was also invited to this meeting, so you can hear from them. No decisions have to be made, or nothing has to be forwarded to town council at that meeting. What our main goal is to get feedback. It is a public hearing, so the public will be welcome to participate, and you can hear from the public.
So we're not making any motions or votes, we're just giving feedback to the consultant?
If planning and zoning is ready, they can make a motion to forward the plan to town council. That is an option for planning and zoning, but we would be, once you're at that stage, we would want to vote for approval, or if, changes need to be made, or if you want to bring us back, some revisions.
Jeremy, I know that some people, excuse me, I know that some people have commented or maybe complained that they didn't know there was a land use planning meeting and maybe missed one or two. I don't know, just because that happened in the past, and I think it was a glitch or something, but maybe somebody make sure that it gets to public notice, but maybe it will anyway. Since
Yes, this meeting, we plan on doing multiple ads and posts and getting the message out there about this meeting, and that it'll be.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say anything other than people brought it up, so listen, if we can avoid it, that'd make everybody.
Yeah. Definitely, and this meeting is meant to be the public. Some of the steering committee meetings were more, kind of roll up your sleeves, get
That's
your hands
probably where
dirty.
they got mixed up.
Yeah,
Good point.
and I'll answer any questions if you got anything wondering about what's going around town, or staff, or what's happening.
What's happening?
Have you, I know that previously there was a permit being, close to being submitted in front of where the Forking Court building is on the east side of Canal. Is there a permit in for that?
There is not. They were in design phase. They have not submitted any plans. I don't know at this point. They may wait until, to delay construction until after the summer season, and maybe either, there are some talks about, are the rides coming back, or do they just maybe want to use that, or parking if it's an option, or they're just weighing what they want to do at this point in the calendar.
Okay. And what about the building? I think we heard maybe 3 months ago that the old Oceans building at the corner of Cape Fear and Lake Park on the southeast corner, that was, I think you said the owner intended to demolish that. Have we heard anything from them?
They are planning on demolishing it. I mean, they're not able to be reopened because of the damages, so They are coming up with a design that is suitable, that will meet, so there were some concerns about fire and building code that they're addressing. They haven't officially submitted an application yet, and they're working with the fire department to do some training. It's not going to be a burn. They're more or less want to get in there to knock down doors and run hoses and those types of things. But I don't have a timeline as of yet. I definitely need to talk to them and try to see when all that is going to occur. But the plan is to redevelop that property.
You heard anything from Publix about putting in a crosswalk?
They were getting their number. DOT said, are okay with it. They asked what, a cost estimate. They submitted that to Publix. Publix was reviewing that because it's, definitely in their interest to put that in. I have not heard.
At the light, right, the Publix light.
Where the ABC and the wings are? Okay, I got you.
Yes. So something that, made sure that DOT is okay with. They're fine. But it would be on the, either the town or the developer to install that. So the town is looking at Publix, hey, is this something that you can provide?
It makes sense since the sidewalks are on the other side of the road.
But I haven't heard a final determination from Publix yet. But I'll see if I can't get you an answer for next meeting.
Thank you.
Oh, last question. What about that blue building? Have you heard anything? I know that, didn't they have a condition they could keep that open for the season? I'm talking about the blue building east of the one we just discussed.
Correct, yeah, the residential units in there were severely damaged and they couldn't be occupied. The building inspector did allow them to occupy the retail space, and they were going to go for 1 year. And then my understanding is that the owners just put it up for sale, and I think he's in maybe negotiations with some adjacent property owners. But
Gotcha.
but yeah, there's no plans for that property as yet, but it will need to come down.
Is that something they were going to require to come down in a certain time-specific way?
Yeah, if it's not it's a hazardous situation that needs immediate, but it is something that we'll need to, because now it's considered an abandoned structure. So we're working with the property owner now, and he's trying to sell it, and part of the sale, it would be to demolish that building.
Is the town hopeful, is staff hopeful that demolition takes place prior to that all those negotiations, whether someone buys it or the guy keeps it, that happens prior to the season beginning? And let's say April, May?
We haven't put a time stipulation on them yet, but it is something we would like to see happen before the season, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else?
Nope.
Mr. Murphy? All right, is that you?
Tonight, we're going to hear one text amendment to remove the use allowing commercial parking lots in the town of Carolina Beach. They're in the package you received over the weekend, it only highlighted the permanent commercial. That was an error on my part. I was supposed to remove the language for temporary as well. And we'll go over that so we understand exactly what additional language is being removed. It's just a little bit of background. There are several parking lots the town the town owns and operates some parking lots, but there's 4 parking lots they also don't own, but they do lease. Those are located at 104 Hamlet, 2 lots there, 1808 Canal, and 312 Canal. This past summer, in 2019, there were 2 temporary commercial parking lots, which were located at 110 Harper and 235 Carolina Beach Avenue North. Since the option to have a temporary or a permanent commercial parking lot has been put in place, there have only been 2 temporary parking permits in the summer of 2019, and there's been 1 application for a permanent parking lot in the fall of 2019. No one else has attempted to utilize this ordinance since it was put in place in, I believe, 2015. the permanent parking lot, which you can see their rough site plan for at 110 Harper, applied for in the fall and would have vested rights to be permitted even if you did remove the allowance today. So they could go forward with that project regardless of the decision, since they do have a permit on file. But any future parking lots, if the text amendment was approved, would not have the ability to use those rights. And just to note that one of the concerns of Ms. LeCompte, who can't be here this evening, was that everyone needs to state, that they do not honor town decals. And I've just copied the bit from our ordinance that says a 2-foot by 2-foot sign, must be there at multiple locations throughout the temporary and the permanent commercial parking lot, notifying people that those decals are not allowed. And we did enforce that extensively on the temporary parking lots this summer, so that the town does make it very clear that you are not allowed to utilize those town decals in any temporary lots. Any questions on the background of the parking? No? All right. So the language that you see in front of you here is only going to be slightly different down in section B and C. So we were originally, on the original application, all of A was going to be removed, but we're also additionally removing the temporary commercial lots and subsequently the language surrounding it. Basically, with the elimination of both, the entire use goes away. There's no need for the language in section 40-261, and the table of permissible uses just has both the temporary and the permanent commercial parking lot language being removed from allowance in the central business district. That's the only place they were permitted, and you would be removing the allowance should you be interested in doing so. Staff recommends the approval of the text amendment. This was brought to us by multiple different interested parties, including planning and zoning, that they saw that these lots were something we should examine and consider not permitting in the town of Carolina Beach, and so we've brought back an ordinance reflecting that, and the decision remains in front of you all this evening.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. I guess I'll start.
Have to open it or anything?
No, it's not a public hearing, right? We can just go straight to discussion.
Well,
It is a public
Yeah.
It
hearing.
is a public hearing. At this time, we'll make a motion to open a public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
At this time, we'll make a motion to close public hearing. All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So after I read this, and I got some calls from some private property owners that are named as part of these lots, and I know 2 of the lots listed were not planning to renew their lease with the town, so they wouldn't have been leased town property, town lots anymore, as far as the way that arrangement came in. I do know, and you brought this up, the 2x2 signs, that was brought in on the 2015 ordinance when we added it because there was a problem at a specific lot and nobody knew what to do. And I don't think we've had near as much problems with it since then. My concern is twofolded. One, the property owners I've talked to have said that, not sure if this is town or parking company or a combination, but it's very poorly managed for their properties. And the way this ordinance is going to read is that if you have a private property lot, you can't control your own parking lot, but the town can lease it from you and control one. Am I reading that correctly?
it would still offer the allowance for a leased parking lot that the town could operate. It would just be
But a
taken.
private party could not operate that.
Exactly, and this is, keep in mind, this is also only in the central business district where this allowance took place. So if those properties were outside of the CBD, they would not have been able to utilize this ordinance to begin with. Their only option would have been to be a town-controlled lot.
So one of the big ones was the management of the lot. If a private property owner wants to lease it to the town, there was management problems. Whether that be from the town or from Lanier at this time, who knows who it'll be next time, I don't know. But management was a concern. Second concern is, I know at least 2 property owners are ready to go to attorneys about this. And I wonder if we've consulted our attorney about taking away the right for somebody to have a parking lot on their property and basically creating a town monopoly for no other term that I could come up with.
Yeah, like, as Miles mentioned, I mean, the use is only allowed in the CBD. So there are other areas that, the town can have a parking lot, but,
It's the most needed place, though.
yeah, it is.
Exactly.
And prior, I guess it was 13 years now, that allowance wasn't there. It's something because of at the time, the downturn, the real estate, and there were some vacant lots, and people were wanting to make use of their land for temporary purposes, and parking was a solution. And it's something that the town at the time was like, we'll just try it out and see what happens. And it's remained in the ordinance.
Was this driven by any specific event? Was it driven by our town? Was it driven by?
A lot of parties.
I asked you
from-
this in a Bronx setting, so I just wanted to bring it up again.
I appreciate that. A lot of interested parties from various committees, from the public, from even staff, came about and discussed it in multiple terms. And it got to a point where staff decided, you know what, hey, everyone seems to be having some significant concerns about this, at least we're being vocal about it. So we'll bring back an ordinance that will remove it, and we'll see where it goes. If this is something that's actually favorable in the eyes of committee members of planning and zoning and ultimately council, or if this is something which, when it's actually put on paper, that people don't actually want to see happen. Sometimes it looks better before it's actually in front of you. And just to bear in mind that this has no reflection on the leased parking lots. These are all private commercial lots. So while those may definitely have some management concerns, that's possible, it would not be impacted whatsoever by today's decision, except that you would not have additional availability of private lots. So it's just important to bear that in mind when you're discussing the leased lots, that we're not touching that section of the ordinance or their regulation or requirements at all.
Right, but
But they would be-
some
yeah.
of them aren't leased. So
Exactly.
if those people that aren't leased to the town decide, okay, we're not doing a parking lot, we could potentially lose a lot of parking in the CBD. I mean, it is private property. They don't have to lease to the town. They leave
Absolutely.
it barren if they want.
Absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that
So-
you were aware we weren't touching that ordinance. That's
Right.
my only concern.
Well, I mean, it's basically saying that's the only way you can have one is you have to lease it to the town.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And that's where I guess I get concerned.
Yes, sir. Just
And-
clarifying.
And with that, I'll let anybody else have any comments.
So, how does this affect the parking lots on C-Band north?
Well,
That's not-
there are both private leased lots as well as town-owned lots as well as a temporary commercial lot. As you see from Bronx Mouse, if
Yeah,
I
the
scroll
most
back
recent
up
ones
here.
that I'm aware of.
We're looking at 312 Canal is a leased lot, which there is also town parking directly adjacent to it on town-owned land. And then 235 C-Band is where the temporary lot took place next to all of the demolitions and nollies there. So there's a variety of leased parking, town-owned parking, and one of the private temporary parking situations for this past summer are
So-
all in that 200 to 400 stretch of Carolina Beach Avenue North.
So, Miles, would those lots that are private be affected by this?
The only lot that would be affected by this would be the 235 C-Band temporary lot. The others would remain and be able to operate the same way they did because they were a Town of Carolina Beach leased property operating as a parking lot and Town of Carolina Beach owned property operating as a parking lot in that area. The only lot that would be impacted by this would be 235 C-Band because it's the only lot in the central business district.
104
Okay, I was going to ask him, but,
It would.
so isn't that property on C-Band on the east of Carolina Beach, where the demolition, I think you meant, but the town sold them that property, correct?
Yes, all of that.
Yeah. They bought that property from the town.
I will have to take
Correct.
your word for that.
It was CBP3.
Yeah, it was
Well,
an
yeah,
entity.
CBP.
By the
P3.
town.
Yeah,
But the ones that you said wouldn't be, the other ones wouldn't be affected, 104 Hamlet or
Yes.
1808, any of the lease lots would if they decided not to renew the lease with the town. Am I understanding you correctly?
If they chose to not renew their lease with the town,
Then they couldn't operate a parking lot, only if the town,
if they were also located in the central business district. I believe 104 Hamlet is. I honestly do not know if 312 Canal is off the top of my head. I think it's on the border. It might be. 1808 Canal wouldn't be impacted by it whatsoever because it's well out of the central business district. So 2 to 3 of those lots would be impacted by it. I believe it might be 3 of them. And that, I mean, so, but their current option has been to lease through the town in the past. They've never attempted to initiate a temporary or permanent private parking lot on those properties.
I just can't see any positive impact from this. I mean, we're at a need for parking, so we're gonna tell them unless you let the town control it, then you're not gonna have the parking lot. So then we're gonna take away the parking from the citizens because we want the town to have a monopoly for it.
I don't believe the monopoly was the perspective of the people issuing complaints.
No, but
I
I
think
bet it would be to some.
it definitely would be a result, but I believe the other concerns that were listed in the memo as part of the packet were that the private owned lots beyond the bare minimum that the zoning ordinance could require in regards to maintenance and organization and signage did not have the same flexibility and understanding that the town lots did. They were much stricter on towing. Their fees were variable, inconsistent, and not largely as affordable as many of the town lots, and that they were running into issues with just general management from a different perspective, that they were almost overly managing these lots and causing even people that were parking there legitimately having issues with how efficient the parking force was. So they were running into issues on the opposite end of not having that control and that small town perspective on the lot. So I mean, it would create a monopoly for the town, 100%, and that's not something that obviously we would like to encourage. But at the same time, it would create a circumstance where all the parking would be effective under the same rules that the town has in regards to flexibility and towing and, you know, very fixed rates and things of that nature.
So why can't we discuss putting different regulations on those private owned lots?
We absolutely
Instead
could.
of just taking the right away. I think that would be a better option to regulate and enforce those things that are a concern instead of doing it this way. I don't remember ever discussing this in a planning and zoning meeting before. Maybe it was before.
It wasn't discussed at large in any meeting. It was comments brought at different times from citizens, committee members, town staff, just throughout the process, especially since this past summer, we dealt with a lot of these issues when the 2 temporary lots popped up, and a number of citizens were running into, through lack of signage or lack of awareness, were parking in these lots with their decals and being towed or being ticketed in an exorbitant fashion, or complaining about the rates difference between the town lot. And so we were running into issues, and we said, you know what, we're gonna eliminate the allowance since it's only ever been used before, and see what kind of feedback we get from that. So if the committee decides that it's more appropriate to approach it from more regulation, that's something that we could also look into. If removing the allowance is not something that you all are in favor of, that's perfectly acceptable, and we can come back with something that we can look and see what is permissible for us to regulate as a town and with a zoning ordinance over these lots and what isn't. But rather than not having been given specific direction in regards to increasing regulation, we went with how do we feel about having this in general, and this is the kind of feedback that we're going to get and we'll take into consideration, and that could be a perfectly good way to go. So
One
go
thing
from
I
there.
want to mention is I know that you said it hasn't been utilized that much, but I was just thinking about the timeline over the last 3.5, 4 years since we did this. There was one lot across from, at that time, Gibby's, that I believe caused that problem that was private. And there were cars that got ticketed there during an event at
Because there was
Gibby's.
no
Because there was no
signs.
signs.
There
that
was
said-
no signage.
And there was a big uproar. I remember this specifically. And that's when this ordinance came about. So over the next 3 to 4 years, all the lots that are here have recently come on board. The guy Johnson in the Surfside got condemned. So he's utilizing his land that he purchased from the town, yes. The Astor lot used to have carnival rides on it. They decided to go in a different direction and utilize it for parking. So it is starting to be utilized more, I would argue, as far as it's not been used. I agree with Melanie on the enforcement thing. If we have an enforcement issue, and I'm going to let Mr. Hoffer speak to that as a former code enforcement officer for the town of Carolina Beach, that maybe that's something else that we could go into a direction of for an ordinance to regulate what these lots can do, and maybe the first time we were to, here, just do it if you want it. So I think that's definitely an option we should discuss.
And in 2015, when it was created, I think we have a lot bigger parking problem than we had 4 years ago. So maybe, that has a lot to do with the only having the recent applications in 2019 versus 17, 18.
It very well could.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Commissioner Boswell just said, I think the optics to some would look like this. Holy smokes, the town's lost, 60, 75. Once that demolition begins, town's losing 60, 75 parking spots. These people over here have got parking. We won't let them have a parking lot, but then we'll go put one there. I think that's the way a lot of people would see it. So, I think that the fact that we're losing parking lots and then kind of, if you're going to have parking, we're going to be your partner in it, it's going to make some people queasy.
Mr. Hoffer?
I just agree with all y'all. It's private property. I just don't see a reasonable scenario for telling someone they can't rent their property, basically renting it in one spot at a time to visitors. Nor should I think the town should be involved in telling people how much they should rent the parking spots for. The free market needs to govern that. Not a fan of, what's the term, predatory towing and that sort of thing. But I think that could be addressed with proper signage. There's got to be a
They have
form of
signage for towing, yeah.
Yeah, there has to be a form of regulations and enforcement that could clear that up.
There's also a learning period too. Most of the issues came from the beginning of the
Yes.
season, and by the end, we were not hearing nearly as many complaints after we went over signage requirements. And I think people adapted that, we can't just park here with our decal kind of thing. But we definitely, we do require postage about towing. We do require postage about decals and pricing. So, and we do have the education aspect of the parking lots is already in the ordinance.
And do they have like a sign? I haven't used really I usually just ride the bicycle or the golf cart, but do they have a sign at the parking, like right when you enter, this is not a town lot?
They do.
As you can see, based
That's
on.
not like in tiny writing or anything like that?
At this time, I don't believe we have a size requirement beyond the 2 foot by 2 foot sign posted at all
Maybe,
entrances and
yeah.
pay stations stating that town decals are not accepted. So I suppose that they could put it in tiny little printing on 2 feet by 2 feet if they chose to, based on the way this is written, and we could adapt that. But it is required to be on a 4 square foot sign as of this time.
I think without taking, this is my opinion, I think without taking away the property rights that Commissioner Hoffer mentions, and I feel the same way, I think everybody here does tonight, it's really only affecting locals, because tourists, if they don't have a town sticker, so they're not worried about it. I think maybe some way, and I don't suppose to know the way, some way to educate town residents that have stickers. Hey, if you park here, it has nothing to do with the sticker you bought. I think maybe education, either in the water bill or however people that get stuff on, I don't know. But possibly that's the best way
Or when
without.
they pick up the sticker.
Huh?
Or when they pick up their sticker, they can put it on there.
Great idea.
Yeah, maybe a parking map of town-owned and operated lots or something of that nature
Or
could be
these
beneficial.
lots are not owned by the town, just to put the ones that are not owned
And-
by the town.
And speaking of that, since next month and for the next few months, people will be picking up their town stickers, maybe that would be an excellent time to have a little extra thing stapled to it.
Which is part of why we wanted to bring this ahead of y'all now, is because
Yeah.
we thought this is going to turn into
What are
an
our
issue.
options here, Jeremy? Do we have to take a vote, or can we give you guys some direction and ask for you to bring it back, or, because I think we're all on the same page.
Well,
here.
hang on, is this going to go to council once it leaves us?
No, it would only go to council if there's a motion made to,
We're not required
to
to make a
adopt.
motion.
Oh,
the,
okay.
to eliminate the ability for a private lot to charge for parking.
Well, I would say that since we have everyone here is in agreement, I would almost, I could ask you to consider making a motion so that we are on the record.
And I understand that, but I think time is of the essence here, that if we go, it has to go to council in January, then the town has to go back in February, then it comes back to us in March, next thing you know, it's April, and we still haven't made a final decision.
No,
Does that make sense?
I think my understanding is it wouldn't go to council if we took.
If we make a motion to deny, it would still go to council.
No, it would not.
It would not,
No,
okay.
Just because this was
Would you like to make that
initiated
motion?
by,
It was initiated by
If it shows
By
up,
the
I
commission.
will.
I,
Can you show me how to make do the motion, and I will make it for
does
you?
anybody else have any comments
yeah.
before we do that?
I mean, only if you're going to, I would approve it. If you're not going to approve it, or if you just want to give direction to staff, there's no motion needed.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I think
So you don't
if
need
we're
this
all on the
one?
same consistency, I think that we would like to see it come back without removing the ability for private property owners to have a parking lot, but maybe more stringent, bigger signage, different things like that. 'Cause-
Bigger
and I think I agree with what Mr. Hoffer said, that the market decides parking, because the old lot that's oceanfront, he can probably get more money than the Astor lot or something to that effect that's further walk away. You know, they're taking steps and they're on the beach, so, but I like the idea of trying, we're limited on what we can do about towing, right? Because that's regulated by state law?
To be
Am I
honest, I
correct on
honestly
that?
don't know.
We've been back and forth on this.
We
Yeah.
couldn't prohibit towing, but we can regulate it if that is what they choose as part of their enforcement.
So, give me an example of how that regulation would be, is that you must ticket, you cannot tow unless it's there overnight or
It's
something to that
private
effect.
property, so if you want to tow a car
You
that's
can just
illegally
tow it.
parked, you can do it. But we
Don't
do
you
have to,
notify?
have the interest of that person's that is towing that says, okay, it needs to be, signage must be appropriate. How's that car being handled? Where is it going to be located? Things of that nature.
And I think we've done pretty well at fixing that issue, because we have had that in the past. But I think if you guys go back and the things issues that were brought up, that we can come up with a better solution for this, if everybody agrees.
I agree.
All right.
As long as, like you said, you can't tell them how much to charge, that's
Yeah.
too far.
So just to clarify, staff will go back and we will abandon the elimination, and we will examine both. My quick plan would be to first, let's get together with operations and the parking authority and come up with a map of lots where you can park with the town decal and lots that have
That
been
would be good
historically
information, yes.
utilized as a private parking lot where decals will not be honored, and see if we can't get that in one of the, either with the decals or in one of the water billing motions sometime in the new year. Two, that we want to look at increasing the size or the density of signage in private parking lots to emphasize not just the town decals, but also the towing and every other potential hazard for someone who is unfamiliar with a private parking lot in town of Carolina Beach. And then lastly, examine what we can and cannot regulate, not getting into the free market aspects, but as to how much control we can have over the enforcement and operation hours, and just other aspects that we might be able to rein in some of the other complaints of the private parking lots in the past.
I like it. I like it. And I think that as far as the signage, maybe we make sure we have contrasting colored signs. If the town's going to use blue, these private lots
Yeah.
need to use a red or something to that effect, that, because red will grab your attention. Oh, crap, stop.
And not have the town logo on them,
Yeah, no.
or
town
anything
logos.
that looks like the town logo.
I think we can come up with a solution that will work for everybody, and we can keep our parking.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you all.
Thank you.
thank you.
Is that it? Do we have to do anything else?
So we don't need the statement of denial? Okay.
We got direction, we will.
Okay.
Back to you.
Any non-agenda items?
Just one, since we're on parking. I do not know the answer to this, but it's just a question. I know that we've talked for, not necessarily us, but council, talked about parking for the last 3 or 4 years anyway, and we are losing some parking. I think, if I'm not mistaken, where the help center is at the corner of 3rd and Cape Fear, all the way back to KDB Hines, the town owns most, if not all, of that property. Unless there's a plan, I don't know, maybe there's a plan to do something infrastructure-wise or a building office for the town. Has anyone investigated using that property for a parking lot, because the reason I ask is if we already own it, I'm not saying you don't need a deck. It's a huge piece of property. Ultimately, once we get the new water tower built, that old one may go away from what I've heard. So we've got a block from Cape Fear to Raleigh, all the way back to KDB Hines. I'm just wondering if the town or if staff can look at whatever process you do is to, what about moving some parking over there? Because we're so close to the beach with our parking, it's almost like we forget if you go somewhere else and go to a beach, if you're 2.5 blocks away, you're close, man. But around here, unless you're right across the street, it feels like, wow, this is a hike. Plus, that lot I'm talking about, and I think the town owns it all, or most of it, on Cape Fear and Third, there's really good access all the way to the beach on either side of the street. There's all the new sidewalks, there's handicap things, and there's crosswalks on both the north and south side of Lake Park. And it's very close to that 15-minute drop-off in front of the gazebo in case someone has a handicapped person that needs to be dropped off. They can drop them and be back, park and be back quickly. So I don't know if anybody's ever looked at it, but I was wondering if you guys can and we can recommend that, or however I need to do it. I've brought it up to several people, but it never, not you guys, but it never got any traction.
Yeah, and one thing that you mentioned would open that property up is if we relocated the well.
Yes.
But with that being, it's a current live well, we are limited on some things we can do. You can't have, because you have to be a certain distance away.
You have to park away from it, don't you?
Yes, you have a certain radius. Right now, there are some parking spaces for the library or former library and the senior center, the help center. We may can, squeeze in a few more spaces.
I'm
on the side.
talking about on Cape Fear, if you can park that close where between the help center and the library, there's
There.
plenty of stuff in front of it on Cape Fear.
But we could definitely look at that parcel and see, with the existing situation, is there, can we create more spaces there?
Yeah, and then the long-term solution would be to, once that's relocated, I assume that's in the long-term infrastructure plan unless it's changed. Heck, then we have from
Yeah, then you
Cape
got
Fear to
all
Raleigh, all the way
options.
back. Yeah, it's a lot. We'd never probably have parking issues again.
All right, since we're making suggestions, in January, the Bike and Pedestrian Committee is going to vote to proceed with a project that will take 7 spots away on Lake Park Boulevard, because we want to extend bike lanes from Carolina Sands all the way up to the lake. And to do it, we need to take 7 spots off of Lake Park on the west side down there.
ones?
Yeah, on Lake Park.
ones?
Yes. Now, that being said, we also have pushed for a redesign of Spartanburg Beach access to go from 1 parking spot to about 11 golf cart parking spots. So we consider that a net gain right
That's
there.
net gain.
And on that same topic, if y'all put your brains on it, that parking lot at Atlanta, the corner of Atlanta and Lake Park, can hold more cars than it holds. And it would particularly could hold a whole bunch more golf cars if you would encourage those spots. Because, currently in these spots, right, you're putting 1 golf cart into a parking spot. You could for that Atlanta one, for instance, you could go in there.
We can
I
put
could
3
do it out
golf
there
carts
with a
in
can of spray paint tomorrow and lay out probably 15 golf cart spots in that parking space, in that lot. And every golf cart that parks in one of those spots isn't parking in a car spot.
Yeah, and you increase revenue too, because anybody parking a golf cart, 99-point-something% of the time, they have their golf cart, they have a parking
Pat,
sticker,
there.
yeah.
Since we're brainstorming.
I've long advocated that we come up with some ideas to educate people that you can park 2 golf carts in 1 spot if you park correctly. And where my dad lives down in the villages, they just know it and they do it. If you park 1 all the way forward on the right and 1 back on the left, you're not impeding traffic and everybody can get in and out of their carts and get in and out of the parking spot. And now you're putting 2 carts in one parking spot. They already have town decals, so you're saving a parking spot for somebody else. So I think there's a lot we could do for education, golf cart routes to take to stay out of Lake Park Boulevard as much as possible, you know, to encourage people to go in different areas. I get all over this island without hardly ever getting on Lake Park, you know. So I think that we really should be looking towards that this year. I agree.
Help alleviate the parking problem. Miles, get on that.
Come back with something in January, Miles.
Well, I know that's more of an operations deal for those guys to design.
We could
parking
tell these
lots. I
private
get it.
property
I-
owners they can only
I-
let golf carts park there.
Talk to Dan Woodward. He's the man. He'll do it.
Yeah, and I could bring back, I'll give you an update on where the town is with all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
I-
Third.
Right.